Now, I talk about moving around the town like it was no big deal. It wasn't. There was enough zombies that just being mobile enough to get through was problematic, and they weren't that dangerous, but even zombies hit on a natural 20, and some of them were heavy hitters. No sentient ones, thankfully. But it was stressful going rescuing people, much less leaving with no guaranteed route back in, or wondering when a zombie was going to smile at you and spring a trap because it still had a brain. So, the hitter team sets out across the rooftops, weapons ready. Some of the zombies follow them as they move across the rooftops, but most don't pay that much attention. They make it to the edges of town fairly easily, move down off the buildings, and out into where it starts to turn rural, keeping their eyes peeled for signs of trails or travel that might lead to a house or cottage. They wished we had a ranger, or druid, or something. The woods were rough, but more creepy than numerically troublesome. They kept getting attacked by undead animals. A rough patch was a swarm of squirrels. Zombie squirrels. Like I said, numerically they decimated everything they had to fight, but it was just kind of depressingly creepy. The undead animals were attacking the living ones. Most of the wilderness had no real chance to speak of. It was a dead place. Sunny day after the storms or no, this was horrible. After enough traveling, they started seeing obvious traces of something more than just the dead wildlife. Obvious low-scale harvesting and hunting, things like that. They follow the paths they pick up to find a small cottage. Now, this cottage was assembled hastily, and some long time ago at that. Part of the cottage was alive. Specifically, it was built so close between trees, that when the trees grew, they grew into and around the walls. Anyone who's seen trees growing through power lines knows what I'm talking about. Bulging masses of living wood like cancer or something. It wasn't a friendly-looking place. It was dark inside. The paladin opted to approach it first, knocking and asking if anyone was there. He received no answer, but opened the door slowly, sword drawn, announcing that he didn't come with violent intentions, but would defend himself. He enters the cottage. Nothing but blackness. It's like he stepped through a veil and there was nothing on the other side. He immediately stumbled backwards back into the bright, natural, streaming sunlight. The Duskblade steps forward and pushes her hand through the doorway. It's just black. The sun is shining normally, and the cottage is surrounded by windows, but there's nothing but blackness inside. And worse, all three of them are humans, with only natural light sources, and nothing that will let them see inside. But this is where they need to be. That much is clear. What choice do they have? The dragon shaman refused to enter. They didn't blame him. But the paladin knows no true fear, and the Duskblade was always way too brave for her own good anyway. So the dragon shaman waited outside with Gold Widow, eyes peered for trouble, standing nervously at the entrance to the door, just so his aura would still affect the two inside, staring into the abyss. The paladin and Duskblade held hands, so they wouldn't lose each other, and started feeling their way around. Knocking into this or that with a thud or crash. Sound was fine, they just couldn't see anything. They reached out carefully, finding a wall and padding their way along it, trying to discern what they were touching. Finally, they feel something warm. After a bit of manual exploring, they realize it's a person, curled up in the farthest corner of the cabin. As they touch it, the darkness folds back from the doorway into them, revealing that it is a she, so it must be the witch they're looking for. Her eyes are gone, as in focused on nothing, staring into the distance, pupils dilated all the way out. She's shaking slightly, just staring. And now, even with the light streaming through the cottage naturally, she still looks like she's in some lightless corner, as if she had a thin layer of shadow smudged over every inch of her. And the entire cabin is full of bones. Bones everywhere. Human bones, animal bones, bones, and the paladin notices at least one human skull with horns and sharp teeth. Dragon shaman, get out of the cottage right now. But they both start trying to figure out what's wrong, shaking her gently, asking her what's going on, who she is, etc. Trying to get any response out of her. She looks up at the paladin and says, shakily, tearily, and very slowly, he hates. Then the door slams shut. It's all he does. He hates, it's all he does. The dragon shaman starts pounding on the door, moves to break a window and finds that they're not glass. Whatever they are, he can't do anything to it. He breathes a line of acid onto the door. Nothing. It's acid-proof. Psycho woman, he can't escape. And the walls start bleeding acid. To quote our paladin, "Oh holy wow Jesus wow that sucks." The woman just sits there, shaking, holding herself. The acid doesn't seem to be bothering her. But it's dripping from the ceiling and burning the paladin and Duskblade. The dragon shaman switches his aura to provide acid resistance, but the cabin is literally puddling up with acid. The resistance won't protect them when they're swimming in it. They start freaking out. The Duskblade punches the woman, but she doesn't respond. They start beating the walls. Nothing. The paladin bull rushes the door, hoping to knock it off its hinges. It buckles, but he hits it hard and stumbles back. He takes another charge. The door finally cracks, breaks, and the two of them come spilling out. They look back. The blackness has returned. The cottage is some kind of freaking Venus flytrap. It's assumed that the bones are from other people and animals which were brave or stupid enough to wander in, and the woman apparently calls it home. The darkness, the walls, the acid, the window, which the Duskblade checks, and apparently their pains of force. It's all to keep everyone else out, and the woman in. But they need her, right? She's not responsive, but we need to know what's going on. So after much debate, the paladin breaks the door off from its hinges, chucks it into the woods, and charges in alone. He reaches the woman, and the darkness fades again, and the walls start dripping acid again. But he has an exit. He picks up the woman, who's now screaming in rage, and charges out the front door with her. She's fighting, weakly, but Gold Widow spins her up into a bundle of web. She immediately calms down. She still looks like she's covered in shadows, even with the sunlight beating down on her. She speaks. "Don't let me go. Don't let him go," and resumes staring into nothingness and not responding. The cabin now looks normal, aside from, the bones of everything that died in an acid bath. The paladin goes in again. Yes, he has a death wish. He's a death delver, remember. He can't find much that survived the acid. Wood and bone is just about all of it. But he does find a few items that were apparently treated to be acid resistant. Some kind of magical experiment. He came to the conclusion that it was the woman herself who set this up. Whatever's wrong with her, she didn't want anything coming for her, and she didn't want any way out herself. So, hopefully we didn't screw up by tearing her out of her little burning nest. Team Lunatic starts setting out back to the church in the city, unsure of themselves. They run into real trouble coming back. The Chambliers that followed after them are thicker on this side of the city now, and they have a helpless hostage in tow. They can't get to the rooftops. But they can get to the cemetery. Long story short, they go over the wall, up into the cemetery, and start hoping it's not a dead end. They find a mausoleum that is locked like a bank vault, and break into it. And find out that it's not a mausoleum. It's just a marble shell around a pit into the darkness below. Gold Widow starts dropping on a silk strand down into the pit, carrying the Psycho Witch woman, and the three others start climbing down after them. And as a side note, my DM apparently does a really good, crazy woman who can barely speak, voice, because when he said, he hates. It seriously sent a chill up my spine. It helped that his face was behind a screen. The striker team leaves the church through the rooftop pathways we've constructed, while the exploration team, me the rogue/factotum, the bard warforged, and the archivist, all set down into the stone halls branching out from the church. The DM describes the halls, including mentioning that everything's extremely dusty. My response: so am I. Even this outfit is dusty. I joke, but this part is actually pretty chilling. While the attack team is topside, in stark unforgiving sunlight and running past moaning zombies, we're lowering ourselves quietly into what amounts to one giant tomb. We know there was a vampire down here, what else? It's slow going too. I'm creeping forward looking for dangerous situations. The bard is aiding me and doing some searching himself a few footsteps behind me. Never know when the bard will roll a 20 while I roll a 1, right? We might as well both be checking. The archivist is a few steps behind the both of us, shining a small wooden pole with a magical light on the end, which doesn't provide much illumination, and scribbling notes about the construction of the area and some of the markings/designs of the stuff we encounter. Every now and then, we come across a door. I didn't have any trouble unlocking them, and there were no real traps to speak of. Actually, there was one door that sent a small spike into the opener's palm, 1 piercing damage, and a wicked STR damage poison with a high save DC. I'm glad I'm dead. Even managed to get a few doses of the poison out of the device, after it pricked me. Inside the rooms were Sadly, a lot of nothingness. There were tables and chairs, tapestries, occasionally you'd find a weapon or two. We found a vial of black liquid that we had trouble identifying. The archivist couldn't figure it out, and it didn't seem to be magical. Out of sheer curiosity, the archivist popped it open and let the smell of it reach him. He actually had to roll a fort save to resist vomiting. It's just Icarus sludge. Blood, or some other biological matter that's gone far rotten. Probably collected from a gravesite or something for a dark ritual of some kind. The Warforged is still humming. I ask him why he hums so much, especially when we might be trying to hear danger approaching. Apparently his creator enjoyed his humming, as silence made him uncomfortable. So he made a point to hum whenever there wasn't much going on. But he'll be quiet if his new friends want him to. I hated telling him it was a good idea, but really, when every noise you make echoes throughout the dusty stone chambers of unknown horrors, it's time to shut the heck up. So he agreed to keep the humming to appropriate times. One of the more significant rooms we discover is, apparently, where the cult of Arcus actually spent time whenever they got together. There are musty old books, and less musty books, which turned out to be journals about some vague plans of theirs. In the back of the room was an altar made out of skulls and chains, and a bone pile in the corner. The bones were stained with blood, and the room smells like a slaughterhouse. There wasn't much useful there, but we took a bit of a break while the archivist leafs through the books and journals, putting the ones that seemed relevant in his pack. One of the books he goes through is, at a glance, just a few hundred pages of music sheets. The bard perks up and grabs it from him, and starts reading it intently. The bard is content to check out the music book. The archivist is more concerned with going through the rest of the tomes. But me? I'm thinking, why the heck does the cult of Arcus have a book full of sheet music? They don't seem like the jovial singing bunch, and if they do have some kind of ritual chants or something, I doubt they need a thick book of sheet music to keep it up. So while the other two are nose deep in books, I get to one side of the bookshelf and give it a good stuff push. It slides along the ground, very, very noisily, echoing throughout the halls. Which made me uncomfortable, and caused the other two to stare at me awkwardly. Yup. There's a hidden safe behind the bookcase. The archivist says he's perplexed, and asks me why I would assume there was a safe behind the shelves just because we found a book of sheet music. I told him that he just couldn't think like a thief, and if you find one thing that's out of place, it usually means there's something bigger out of place related to it. So while they set back to the books, I set to safe cracking. Which actually took 3 rolls to bypass. Inside the safe was some cool stuff. A skull charred black, creepy. A pair of masterwork lockpicks, a dagger with unidentified properties. Later, it turned out the dagger was enchanted with the sole property of being able to convert sneak attack damage on the undead into either STR or dex damage instead of nothing, laughing face, and apparently the reason the safe existed. A flute, with imagery in bas relief from end to end. Beautiful imagery depicting a sunrise and praying hands. The bard flipped through the book, and found some notes scribbled in abyssal, which the archivist translated. Apparently, the flute had belonged to a powerful priest of some unnamed religion. It was stolen by the cult of Arcus, and was being smuggled around looking for someone powerful enough to destroy it. The book, too, was tied to the flute, and would reappear near the flute even if burned to ashes. It was full of disgusting, to the cult, beautiful holy music, most of which was mundane, but some of which apparently had real magical effects. The book was supposed to be locked in the safe too. Apparently, the book decided otherwise. Not that it's intelligent, just... yeah. There must have been a reason it was on the shelf, right? The bard tucked the book into the pack, and gave the flute a good looking over. Without thinking, he brought it up to his mouthpiece, and started playing a few notes, and when the DM asked if he'd give up a use of his bard song, he agreed. The DM actually played the theme to Pan's Labyrinth here. Which, if you haven't heard it, it's really beautiful and haunting. He described the area around the bard starting to glow faintly, spreading out in a soft but all-encompassing light, driving back the shadows. Which is when we saw it. Through the doorway, along the wall across the hallway, a pale humanish figure with flat gray-green eyes hunched, apparently wearing nothing but a few light chains wrapped around himself, watching us intently. When it realized we could see it, it hissed and ran forward out of our field of view. The bard stopped playing, startled, and everything was plunged back into shadows. We stood motionless for a while, nervous. Okay, terrified. We didn't want to leave the room, wondering if that thing was right around the corner waiting for a fight. We had no clue what it was, even the archivist. Rolled knowledge rolls, came up with nothing. Finally we realized we had no choice but to exit. The bard lifted the flute and played his tune again while we walked. It cast light out to a 60-foot radius, 30 feet past my dark vision I got from being undead. The bard had to make perform rolls to keep playing the song every few rounds. We'd advance carefully, making spot checks. The archivist had his bone shard pistol out, I had my new dagger and a few other daggers in my belt. We didn't see anything. Then the bard failed a perform roll. The song ended, and the area was plunged into black again. The archivist had 20 feet of light around him, the bard could only see the archivist, and I could see in 30 feet around me. I could just barely see the archivist at this point. He was 30 feet away. Well, mind you, we were in a hallway, so I could see 30 feet in any given direction from where I was, not a 30-foot radius. The DM rolled some kind of attack, and then told the archivist to roll a reflex save to hold his light stick. He failed. The DM didn't give us tactical information, he just told us what we saw. And he gave a lot of the information to us individually, so we didn't automatically know what everyone else was doing. Me and the bard both saw the archivist raise off the ground a few feet, and then the light source dropped and he was pulled. Well, away. Up, down, backwards. We didn't see, he was gone. The DM rolled for hit point loss on the archivist. Then he let the archivist take a shot with his bones hard crossbow, but he had to roll for direction, not anything specific. He did it by rolling 4 d20s. 2 d20s would be for the 2D axis parallel with the floor, and 2 would be for opposite axis. Anything higher than a 36 on 2 dice was a reroll. 1 and 36 were west and 18 was east. We didn't get to see what he rolled, but the DM said we heard a tick sound as the bones hard hit in a specific spot between the two of us. Now, personally, I thought that was really darn clever. The archivist gets a blind pistol shot, so the DM rolls 2 360 random directions and gives us the location the dart goes. It kinda pulled me in. Made me feel for the archivist, firing blindly, and really showed what a blind shot meant. The DM made the archivist roll some checks in secret, escape artist checks, with the benefit of hindsight. He failed. I had to roll a spot check. Then I got hit flat-footed, because the thing successfully closed the distance between us while hiding. It was a good hit on its part, and the DM said I could tell it was trying to sneak attack me, not realizing I wasn't alive. The bard runs to the light source. Naturally, he can't see anything and isn't sure what to do. I debate running towards the bard, knowing he was probably freaking out as much as he does. I'm sure the DM just told him that he heard the rogue shout in pain, or something. But instead I took a slash at the thing, hit it solid, and twice, but have no clue how much damage the thing can take. The archivist fails another unknown check. The thing disappears. The bard runs towards where he heard me, ready for trouble. I run towards him. Heh, now, our DM is great, but he's also willing to be a jerk. The bard apparently told him that he was gonna attack as soon as he saw it, or something comparable. The next thing he saw was me sprinting into his field of view. Boom. The bard socks me hard in the stomach, knocks me over prone. He's very instantly apologetic. I down a light healing potion, not sure of what else to do other than getting my hit points back to full, and take a skin for trouble, or seeing if I can see the archivist. The archivist fails another check. Manages to make a noise we hear through his gag. He's on the ceiling, 20 feet up. Tied to some random creepy architecture and trying to get loose. The thing comes sprinting, charging full speed, hits the bard with some kind of charging grapple, because it wraps around him and the two go sprawling past me down the hallway, tumbling over each other. The thing lands on its back and kicks the bard over him in one fluid motion, sending him another 40 feet down the hall into a metal door, 4d6 damage. The bard hastes himself and throws the light down the hallway, shouting at me to take it. I shout that I don't need it, and he says, "So I can find you." Why didn't I think of that? So I tumble up to the light, grab it, and then coat my dagger in Kython venom. I can make it once a day, spiritually, remember. The archivist makes his escape artist check, natural 20, and wriggles out of the chains. But now he's clinging to a bunch of creepy spiked designs 20 feet up. He opts to drop, taking the 1d6 damage for the fall. The thing takes another dash, this time past me towards the archivist, Geez, it was fast. It must have had 50-foot move rate before adding running or charging on top. I got an attack of opportunity, and nailed it with the Kython venom. It staggered, but didn't stop its charge, and bull rushes the archivist hard into the stone corner. Think it was 2d6 damage. The bard sprints towards me, I sprint towards the creature. The archivist casts the only spell he has prepared besides cures. Light. On the chains wrapped around the creature. The creature snarls in rage and opens a full attack on the archivist, and drops him to negatives. The bard manages to close the distance between the two, get to the archivist, and give the creature 2 solid punches. I get up to the whole brawl and sneak attack the thing. It howls in rage and sprints down the hallway away from us, leaping up to the ceiling. The bard realizes that it's 50 feet away. His sound burst has a 45-foot radius. Boom. 1d8 sonic damage, fails its save and is stunned. Drops from the ceiling and takes 1d6 damage from the fall. I UMD a cure wand, and bring the archivist back to consciousness. The archivist looks down the hallway at the thing covered in glowing chains. He's sitting there covered in his own blood. He has about 2 hit points. Takes his bones hard crossbow and fires. Hits the thing. 1 damage. It was the thing's last god D hit point. The DM ruled that it hit the thing in the neck and tore open an artery. It slumped against the wall and fell into a pile, drowning in its own blood. Our jaws, all 6 players, are dropped. The paladin player, remember the other teams are still watching entertained, managed to irk out a small, what? The DM has his eyebrows raised, he was a little stunned too. The archivist player holds his hand like a gun and looks at it wide-eyed. We all stare at the archivist. Archivist. For how little damage this thing does, it's been extraordinarily useful to have at hand. I guess I'll just keep hanging on to this. 1 freaking damage. Unfreaking believable. Sigh. Oh, also, he immediately came back to life, and was still pretty quick, which means he was probably a sentient vestige, just, you know, he wasn't smart to begin with, and they have the same mental faculties, but we cacked him pretty easily the second time. Basically just punched/stabbed him until he went down. So we patch ourselves up, and keep on pressing down. We came to the conclusion that the thing must have been a hunter for the cult of Arcus. Or an enforcer. Or something. Whether it used to be human, or was just some monster they managed to wrangle into their service, it was obviously down here to keep victims chained up for sacrifice. If we were nervous before, now we're jumping at our own shadows. The archivist actually panicked and shot a rat just because it squeaked near us. But we're adventurers. More than that, we're explorers. An archivist of forbidden religious lore, a one-of-a-kind, in this world, sentient golem tail spinner, and an undead rogue. If we aren't brave enough. The archivist pointed out that we were under the cemetery. The bard asked how he could tell, and he gestures to the ceiling. There is, what looks like, upside-down blades of black grass. Soulroot. It's a type of grass that only grows underground, near dead bodies or sources of negative energy. We must be under a grave site of some kind. Of course, when he tells us something like that, it's info the DM gave us. But having the player who would know about it explain it? So helpful for immersion. We also start finding spell components. More vials of, that icky black stuff that smells bad. Small bones, animal parts, traces of gold dust glittering. We start noticing strange patterns etched into the walls. Ceiling symbols, they're often used by demonologists to keep their summons from turning on them. We need them in church rituals sometimes, they can weaken or hold evil outsiders in place. I've got a terrible feeling about this, but it's not like we're going to turn back. Finally, we come to the end of the line. Long stone hallway, metal door covered in ceiling symbols, with a red light glowing out from underneath it. We didn't even talk. We could have bickered about whether it was a good idea or not, but what would be the point? We all knew, one way or another, that door was getting opened. So I set to work on the locks. It wasn't locked. The door creaks open normally. The room is bathed in red light, and symbols on all the walls are glowing brightly with a more violent shade of red. In the center of the room is a tall dark figure with yellow eyes and sharp teeth. Circling him are pillars of red light that seemingly have shapes of their own. The figure grins a wicked grin and waves slowly. We see that he has 6 fingers. Me, what? But, how? What's going on here? Archivist, it's Graz ZT. A demon lord. Prince, it interrupted with a smile, in a deep and confident voice. Archivist, a demon prince, wait. It's not him. It's an aspect, a lesser aspect. The figure gives an overly friendly smile with his eyes closed. So, yeah. To elaborate specifically. It was a weak splinter of the true Graz ZT, an aspect who arrived on the material plane to complete some minor but specific task he wanted done personally. We didn't know what, but he did tell us that the cult of Arcus intercepted his planar travel, magically, and bound him here to prevent him from succeeding in whatever he wanted to do. We asked what he came here to do. To destroy Arcus, of course. We kind of panicked a little at that. Asked it if Arcus was on the material plane. He simply rolled his eyes and dismissed us with a wave. Told us, actually very politely, that we didn't know the tiniest fraction of what truly going on. We asked if he would tell us more. The archivist, in particular, was wide-eyed to actually be talking with an entity such as Graz ZT, even if through an incredibly weak aspect. He said that he might be inclined to shed some light on the darkness Arcus had shrouded us in, if we would do him a favor. Hesitant to make a deal with a demon, let alone a demon lord, prince, but really needing to know what we were fighting against here, we asked what he wanted us to do. He told us that, somewhere in the area near the city, one of his more notable pets was waiting to contact with him. He needed very much to come into contact with her, but was confined, mentally and physically, to 2 locations. The true Graz ZT was still sitting in his palace in the abyss. The aspect of Graz ZT was currently confined to this small room with no way out. Even if you somehow broke the seals binding me here, my time on this plane has run low. All that holds me here are these seals, and I don't know when I'll be able to return, or if I can avoid Arcus's forces the next time. So you want us to bring her? Graz ZT, yes. Bring my pet to me, so I can do what I came here for originally. Then I might be inclined to tell you what, exactly, is going on. Archivist, very well then. How can we find her? Now, I'm sure you all see what's coming. We had our suspicions at the table. At that moment, a bundle of human wrapped in spider silk descended on a thin strand, to land off to the side of the figure. Graz ZT lets loose a low chuckle, turns to us, and says, I'm impressed. That was very fast. Come crawling down after her, are a dragon shaman and a dusk blade, with a paladin riding a silver spider descending on his own line on the other side. Paladin, from above, what in the 9 hells is this? Graz ZT, shouting up, it's actually a tad bit more abyssal than hellish down here. Graz ZT turned to the witch, who was apparently his thrall/servant/worshipper/pet. She crawled to him like a worm, inching forwards in her silk cocoon. All she managed to say was, Master. Dragon Shaman, I knew this was a bad idea. The 2 didn't even look at us. Graz ZT held his hand near the edge of his cage, and the woman ran her face slowly along the other side with her eyes closed. Graz ZT told her to stay strong for him, all she could do was nod. So then we get the exposition. Finally. We know, at least part of what's going on. We've already established the nature of vestiges, binders, Tenebris, Arcus. We know Arcus is trying to get Tenebris back from the nothing to become a god, which would essentially make him unstoppable. Arcus is already immensely powerful, Tenebris was powerful enough to slay deities. If Arcus and Tenebris managed to exist at the same time, in the same form, well, we're talking about a being that would be able to go toe-to-toe with Asmodeus in a steel cage match, and Asmodeus is one of the most powerful beings anywhere. But Asmodeus has a calm collected restraint, he's a creature of law and rules. Arcus/Tenebris would revel in nothing more than outright carnage on a multi-planar scale. We're talking end of days, in more ways than one. No more world, no more afterlife, nothing. In the end, that is. First there would be a few 100,000 years of slaughter and pain and inescapable suffering. But why hasn't it happened already? Vestiges are crossing over at an alarming rate. Some true powerful vestiges have come back as sentient creatures, and still more are probably inevitably going to come back with their power intact. If there's one vestige who should have already found a way in, it's the one the jailbreak was planned for, right? Except Graz ZT knew something was up, and Graz ZT is one devious bastard. He managed to get enough servants, with enough power, to learn pact magic, become binders, for him. In the final days before the veil between this world and the nothing was pierced, his servants summoned Tenebris to them. Tenebris did not want to make pacts, of course. His freedom from the Nothing was close at hand anyway. But apparently, that's not how pact magic works. He couldn't just refuse, not yet, not before the veil was actually pierced. The difficulty in binding him, to make a good pact, was astronomical, but he could still be bound. Now, it's been pointed out that when you bind a vestige and make a pact with them, you show their sign, and are influenced by their behavior. Actually, you don't have to show their sign, or be influenced by them. If you make a good pact, beat the vestige's binding DC on a charisma roll, you stay in control. You suppress their sign, control their influence, but still get their powers. But because Tenebris didn't want to make any pacts, the DC for binding him was outrageous. No one had a chance of succeeding. So any of those who forced Tenebris to bind with them automatically made bad pacts. They had to show Tenebris' sign, and behave under his influence. What are his sign and influence? You look like you are standing in shadows no matter what the light source, and you become apathetic and detached. One of your powers? You can create an area of blackness around you at will. The witch was Graz-ZT's servant. Always has been. A powerful one at that. When Graz-ZT saw that the veil would be pierced, and Tenebris would escape, he had the witch, and several other people, 22 others in total, apparently, bind Tenebris, knowing it would be a bad pact, knowing he would be fighting them to be freed. As long as one living soul has Tenebris bound to a pact, he can't leave the veil. They're anchoring him away from Arcus simply by continuing to breathe. Tenebris is fighting them to escape. It's a terrible strain. They're forced to hold him longer than pacts are meant to be held, 24 hours. It's currently going on weeks. The witch set up her cabin, using power granted from Graz-ZT, as a pit for her to hide in. She's been there for weeks, eating scorched fragments of cultists or animals that have come to the house after her, or randomly, and alternating between catatonic staring into her own black shroud, or fighting the urge to kill herself, Tenebris trying to escape. She's actually relived to be bound head to toe in spider silk, because being powerless means she can concentrate all her energy on holding Tenebris inside of her. Yeah. Wow. So, in the end, Graz-ZT gave her encouraging words and reinforced her resolve and power in her servitude towards him. He convinced us, reluctantly, to undo the bindings holding him in the room, and true enough, he immediately vanished back to the abyss, no longer able to visit the material plane. He has no help he can give us, unless we come to the abyss to see him firsthand. Evil chuckle. But we really have only one sane option here. We have to keep the witch with us. We have to keep her alive, defend her from the cultist of Arcus who would gladly kill her on sight, try to find as many of the other 22 as possible before they die, keep them alive, and try to find some way to get them to Graz-ZT's lair of the abyss for safekeeping. We feel very, very small. The dragon shaman asked if the paladin should fall for consorting with Graz-ZT and the witch. The DM pointed out that talking to a bound demon isn't the same as making a deal with it, and that the witch, despite being evil, is our prisoner, being held to prevent greater evil being committed. Really, sorry to bring up the paladin falling deal. We don't need another discussion about paladin ethics. Our DM said it was fine, it's fine P. So that's all there is about that. We have the witch, who can act as a beacon towards the other servants of Graz-ZT by her master's guiding hand. And we're, you know, screwed. As is the rest of the world. And lest we forget, everything that dies is still coming back to life, so it's not like this new problem resolves the old one. So, we set out northeast. We told the commoners we were leaving, even though we aren't beholden to them anyway. We gave them dishes that produce free food. We've really done all we can in this world to help them. We're setting out to help more, if we can. But try this on for size. As we're setting back out over the rooftops in the city, watching the swarms of zombies moaning angrily at us, I spot something. One of the zombies isn't moaning. It's not even moving. And it looks very familiar. It's rotten and beat to hell, but, it looks, like. And then the zombie flies out of the crowd and swoops over in front of us for a moment to wink and blow us a kiss. It's the wizard. The one who used to be in our party. I draw my crossbow and move to open fire, but he snaps his finger, and he's gone with a laugh. Of course he found us. He knows us personally, and is a diviner specialist. Crap. We kept our eyes peeled, but apparently he was just stopping by to make us wet ourselves. He seems to take great joy in making us uncomfortable. I wonder what vestige he was. Sigh. Ah well. That's all for now. It's gonna be a pain getting caught up in time for Halloween, especially with the sessions going on So we set out on the open road. Or more specifically, we set out through the woods, figuring the undead animals would be creepier, but less dangerous, than a lot of stuff we might face traveling in the open. We would make camp in the trees, sleeping in spider webs spun by Gold Widow, and we had relatively little trouble with undead animals. We did have some stuff go on, but most of it was minor. We traveled for days, resting lightly, using our magic lightly so we could go on for longer without the resting period. Occasionally we'd fight, most of the time we just simply outpaced the forces after us. It bit us in the behind once, when we wound up resting and woke to discover that the monsters we outpaced had found us, and there were a lot more of them than we would have had to fight individually. But we pressed on. After a few days of travel, the witch tells us the binder we were heading northeast for is dead. The next closest one is straight east. So this is looking positive, right? Pessimism instantly overwhelms us as a group. Not in a bad way, the game was still fun, but we're certainly feeling rather hopeless. We ask the witch how far the next one is, and all she says is far. We don't have a choice though. We change our course for east. As we walk, we start asking the archivist how we could get the binders to the abyss, alive and whole. He says that we can shift to the abyss, but without explicit knowledge of the plane, we have no way of telling where we'll wind up. We could easily end up shifting directly in front of Arcus himself. Ugh. Yeah, things are bleak. To make matters worse, we noticed something that put our hairs on end. There was a large pack of wolves through the trees just ahead, all dead, sitting patiently and watching us. It seemed like there was something wrong with the picture, well, wrong in addition to the fact that they were rotting, and then we noticed. None of them had eyes. But they didn't just have eye sockets. There was nothing but darkness there, as if their heads were hollow pits of blackness. We walked forward slowly, weapons drawn, and eased along one side of them. As we turned, so did they. They turned their heads to keep us directly in their field of vision, and turned their bodies when they couldn't turn their necks anymore. They didn't attack us. They just watched. They didn't follow us. They just watched. We started looking around. Birds in the trees. No eyes. Craning their necks towards us. Squirrels. Rabbits. A deer. No eyes, not a single one, just that horrible empty blackness, all just staring at us as we traveled. At some point, they stopped staring at us. They were staring forwards, in the direction we were going. We actually stopped to debate veering off in some random direction at that revelation. Talk about ominous? You might as well have thunder crash. But after a long discussion, we come to the conclusion that, whatever's happening here, we can't fight it if we don't know what it is. So we press on in the direction the animals are staring. It's getting dark, very dark, even though the sun's only been up for a few hours. We see, ahead, in the trees, a clearing, in a sense. It's the opposite of a clearing. It's a void. We can tell where the land is, it's still there, but it's like we're staring into a starless sky at the same time. There's a dead body in the clearing, twitching. The animals, they're all staring at the body. We're staring at the body. Some of the animals aren't just staring though, they're running in a circle, and darting across it in strange patterns, climbing over each other, and continuing to run counterclockwise. As we watch, the corpse spins 2 spins. There on its back, it circles in brief jerking motions like a top. A blade thrusts out of one at its arms, shredding the hand into a puddle of gore with a sickening sound. It twists and jerks, spinning up onto the blade/hand. One leg rises straight in the air, and another blade thrusts from its calf, shredding the foot, pointing straight towards the sky. One by one, the thing's hands and feet are shredded by blades coming violently from inside its body. It's distant, but we can tell the thing's face is distorting, horribly. And then it begins to spin. Archivist, saints have mercy on us, that's the dancer. It sees us immediately, and comes dancing towards us in strange elegant patterns, spinning like some bloody blade top the entire time. As it approaches, it spins so rapidly against a large tree that the trunk turns into wood chips where it moved and the tree collapses. We circle into a group, figuring splitting up is suicide. We put the witch in the dead center, to protect her. The thing, Paimon, a vestige, for those who haven't guessed, a vestige of dancing blades, comes spinning towards us, up into a tree and on fluid motion, spins, pounces, and falls directly into the center of our square, 1 initiative / and hits the witch, hard. I'll spare you the gory details, partially because it'd take days and days to write if I detail every encounter we've had up until this point. But in the end, we had the vestige gurgling blood, and in its death throes. Our DM, by the way, apparently does a really wicked death gurgle / vestige / garbled voice. And it asks us, "What do you think will happen if you kill me?" And our paladin says, triumphantly, "Back to the void with you." The vestige starts to reply, "Yes, back to the void." But a more important question would be dash, and here, the paladin rolls his dice, physically, saying he attacks the thing right now. He crits, destroys the thing utterly, sliced it in half in one strike, and the thing implodes into nothingness. We cheer. And then, from one of the animals, a dog, we hear a gurgling garbled voice. The more important question. It racks and twists, its form warping. A blade thrusts from one of its limbs, which are becoming more human every second. The more important question is, why do you think I'll stay there this time? Suicide grin. To quote our paladin, well, you know. What can we do here? The thing, if it can't outpace us, can at least keep pace with us. We're surrounded by dead animals. We don't know if there's a size limit on corpses, but apparently the link has been made, the dancer is manifest, he won't stay gone, and we are trembling. Then comes the awesome. The paladin and Duskblade, fearless sods they are, both charge the thing in a rage. As this is happening, the bard nonchalantly, he's very nonchalant, asks the archivist why they call him the dancer. The archivist just looks at him, like he's crazy, and starts casting to help the paladin and Duskblade. The bard? The bard whips out his flute and starts playing that song again. The light begins to glow around him, and Paimon, the dancer, begins to dance. Stop that, it howls. The bard keeps playing. It screams in rage. The bard keeps playing. It dances in circles around us, twirling furiously in the directions the bard takes it. And finally, the bard dances him straight between 2 trees. 2 trees Gold Widow had spun a thick sturdy web in. The dancer stutters, starts slicing through the web, but Gold Widow is there. She immediately begins spinning the dancer under her, wrapping him, tightly, arms and legs extended, until he's nothing but a tube of web, screaming furiously at us, of course. We book it. I mention that it's only a matter of time before it gets loose, to which the dragon shaman says, then we'd better not stop to chit-chat. Despite that, the archivist tells us a brief history of what we were just fighting. Most of us knew, in a metagaming sense though. But yeah, that was a vestige given flesh. Apparently they were starting to find ways in, and once they were here, they could just keep coming. Dang. Anyway, we ran and got some good distance between us. And then we notice the animals. They're all staring at us again. Before a similar mess could happen, there came the wind. Distant and soft at first, but growing until the trees were swaying back around us and we could barely hear each other. The wind carried a voice with it, complete with a spooky sound clip. It was hard to make out. Thankfully, the DM let us listen to it a few times, but we picked out what seemed to be an echoing whisper saying a lot we couldn't make out, plus come to the north. We can help. The sound clip was very intimidating. It was ominous sounding at best. At worst it was horrifying. So now we're left with a tough decision. Do we follow the breeze, and head north with the witch in tow, hoping we can keep her alive? Or do we head east, trying to save another binder bound to Tenebris? We were fairly split over the whole thing, and actually talked about splitting up again. I convinced everyone that would be suicide at this point. Splitting up is one thing when you have a safe base, but at this point it'd be a game over. We finally decided to head north. We were having a hard time keeping this one binder alive, let alone 2 at once. If whatever was up there was setting a trap, well, we were screwed anyway. Things couldn't really get much worse, right? Haha. Oh. I am, unfortunately, going to gloss over the travel a little bit. We had encounters with the undead, of course. Sometimes, we'd wind up squaring off against foes that were still alive, including a small group of Arcus cultists, and some summoned demons, who tracked us down trying to kill off the Tenebris binder. We even had to fight a few more binders, but fighting them meant finding some way to keep them from following us while we book it. I'm not trying to be abrupt, it's just, it would be a small novel if I detailed the whole campaign. Eventually, the breeze came back. It directed us, in small bits, through the area we needed to go. We came to a rocky mountain pass we had to traverse, which was very stressful. The paladin opted to travel horizontally, on his mount, occasionally peeking out over the tops of the canyon we were in to make sure nothing was coming over the top. The rest of us just moved quickly, eyes peeled, panicking every time we saw a hole in the ground. At one point, as we came along a far skinny path, we saw faintly glowing runes etched into the sides of the stone walls. Being the rogue, I had to inch up to them. They were some kind of magical trap, so I started to disarm them. Rolled a natural one. They triggered instantly. We all had to roll will saves. The paladin rolled a 1, the dragon shaman and me both failed. The paladin experienced no effect, me and the shaman ran back the way we came, screaming in terror. And coming crashing down the path. A giant violent wave of thick syrupy blood. The smell hit like rancid meat and we saw from a distance that there were corpses in the wave. Some of them were flailing. The dusk blade did a swift fly and got out of the initial crash of blood, but her and the paladin could only watch in terror as the wave crashed over the rest of us. Then we all got another will save. We passed this one. Instantly, the canyon was bone dry, though me and the dragon shaman were still sprinting back the way we came, hollering in utter nightmarish terror. The wave of blood was an illusion, nothing more, accompanying a symbol of fear effect that had me and the shaman consumed with panic for several rounds. GUH. Finally the group managed to get back together, and me and the shaman managed to calm down, and we all, reluctantly, pressed on. When we came back to the area where the symbols of fear had been, we heard a quiet echoing laugh. Eely. The dead wizard. That rat bastard.